So, what I would be curious to know is how many people here derive income from something other than display advertising?
How about just derive income?
Nobody does.
My husband, does that count?
There you go, that's good. He's your primary funder?
Yes. I'm not a biggest fan.
So I think the reason it's important to have alternative means of income, revenue for your business, for your site is, you might have heard about this during the session last night. I don't agree that display ads are going away, but certainly display advertising is not necessarily a growth business. And when you run a lie-in site, you have opportunities to do a lot more than just display. And ultimately, you need to piece together a revenue model that works for you. It's harder to get there with just display advertising than it is looking beyond it. So I think that's why this is important. And so I'm here to talk, I guess, a little bit about what we do other than display. What we do is mostly other than display, it's mostly sponsored content. We get about 40% of our revenue from sponsored content, and I would say that it is the thing that where our clients are the happiest. We get great feedback on it. The clients hear about it, but I should probably explain what is sponsored content to us.
Yeah, because the very definition
Right.
is very.
There are lots of definitions of sponsored content, and I'm going to muddy the waters and tell you that we run 5 different types of sponsored content on our sites. And I didn't properly introduce myself, but I'm Scott Brodbeck, and I run 4 sites in the DC area, including ARL Now in Arlington. I had to double check. So what are those five types? So one of them is a sponsored column, and this is a regular informative feature written by the advertiser. And it's meant not to be a direct sales pitch. It's meant to be, information on a topic that's useful for readers.
So like you might have a financial advisor that writes about how to choose a good trustee.
Precisely. So we have a hospital that writes about health issues. We have a real estate agent who writes, of course, about real estate. We have a guy who owns a beer and wine store who writes about beer and wine.
Okay, so can I stop you for a second?
Sure.
So these are multiple columns, all sponsored by a different business who has a stake in that topic.
That's right.
Okay, and how many of those are there?
We run at least one every week.
No, what I mean is, how many total of those types of columns do you publish? I mean, 20, 15, 10, 5?
We have, I believe, 7 or 8 sponsored columns.
And you would look at different categories. If you found a guy who seemed to be articulate and credible, but also was a business owner and was willing to give you money.
Yeah, so the challenge is finding a client that works for. It's not going to work for everybody. Not everybody has a topic, a business that lends itself to doing this. But with a little creativity, you can make financial planning interesting. But yeah, they need to be good, willing to put in the time to do this. If someone's running around like a business owner has no time, this might not be for them. But if they do have time, or if they have someone on their staff who's good at it, it's a wonderful, way to really get your business's name out there. And we typically charge advertisers between $100 to $200 per post.
And just really quickly, you've got categories. Can you put at the top of your financial planning, law?
So
Food and
financial planning, legal, pets, real estate, healthcare, beer and wine, and apartment rentals is another one for us.
We've done gardening. You mentioned real estate. We had a pest control company that did sort of, it wasn't like how to catch rats, but it was sort informational things that people who lived in houses would want to know about, the season. It's this season for pests, and this is what you can do to deal with those things.
Yeah. But this is something that's high touch, that if you're going to do it, you really need to work with your client to make sure that the content they're putting out is interesting and actionable, and that they're not just trying to sell themselves. Because it works best when they're producing content that stands by itself and could be an article anybody read.
I'm curious, when they work with you guys, do they submit to editorial oversight? Like when the column comes in, is it subject to editorial deletion of calls to action? Like,
We
do you
actually
submit to that as a client?
I mean, don't get me wrong. We do allow calls to action. At the end, saying, for the hospital column, come in for a free skincare screening. If it's talking about skin cancer, so that's allowed. But it can't. The lead can't be, we're the best. Come buy our stuff.
Right. That's funny because we don't allow, like for ours, we actually do not allow calls to action.
That should just be implied, that because they are showcasing their expertise, that people should get a hold of them.
Well,
You do mention that they have the business.
Yes, like they
That's
have
in
a
the tagline.
byline that mentions their business. They also have like a footer at the end of the piece that also mentions their area of expertise and what they do. But I was just curious whether, I think we have a question back here.
Yes.
It was interesting what you said, you don't allow a call to action, and then you gave an example of a call to action that fell right into what I've been thinking about. I was thinking that for our site, one of our policies could be that you could have a call to action if it has a public service announcement. It's like a PSA almost. And so like your example of cancer screening sort of falls into that category for me. So I'm just curious what people's threshold of pain with that is. Does it sound reasonable, or it sounds good to me. It feels all right to me, and that I've been thinking about that lately.
I think whatever you do, you want to make it. You want to make it a very clear, bright line of what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. Because the last thing you want to do is start arguing with your client about why something's just over the line.
Right.
You want to be doing this in partnership with your client and not have an adversarial relationship with them. So making clear what's okay and what's not okay at the outset is very important.
Do you have a template or a guide as to what you would like them in terms of word count, in terms of, do you have like a set of instructions that you give them?
Yeah, we have some general guidelines. Keep it around or no more than 500 words. If it's too long, people aren't going to read it. We actually produced a Advertiser style guide that we give to any new client that just sort of gives general, tips on making it interesting and writing, ways to write it better. That we try to answer all the questions we've gotten on this.
Do you have, are you doing like category exclusivity? For example, if you have a real estate column, is it the same real estate broker who writes all of them, or can you have one broker do 1 week and another broker do another week, so that you're not looking like you're...
So we have category exclusivity for our columnists. Now, there can be other types of sponsored content about real estate that isn't a column.
But only
Only one columnist. And what this produces is urgency in the sales process. Saying if you're the columnist, you're our columnist. There will be no more columnists on this topic.
Forever, or do you have a time?
As long as they're a client.
As long as they want to keep paying.
As long as they keep those checks rolling in.
So this is the one type of content. You said you had like 5.
I have 5. Yes.
Okay.
But one question.
Yeah.
Do they eventually burn out? I mean, that you get someone to do it, and they do it 8 articles, and then they're just...
So what you don't want to do is you don't want to have, in my opinion, you don't want to have sponsored columns that change every month, or every 2 months. So we lock down our columnists to, we try for a minimum of 6 months. Because you want, it's effective when the reader sees it over and over again, and you make, this client, increases, they build trust in their brand through it. And if you have it, if it's fly by night, that's not going to work. So yeah, we try to avoid that whenever possible. But there is.
So they do maybe one every other Thursday or something. In other words, is it in the same spot all the time too?
So we do it on either a weekly or bi-weekly basis. And they have a certain day of the week slot, and we only run one column per day, per weekday.
Scott?
Yes.
Not to get you too bogged down in this one type of content.
Sure.
Well, actually, this might apply to all of them. But what's your, for both you guys, what's your policy on archiving this stuff? Does it stay live forever once they've bought this slot? Basically, it stays up.
It stays alive forever. You can find it on search engines. We actually get some good residual Google traffic on these columns.
We do the same. I mean, it's treated like every other piece of editorial content. So if there's ever a time that we purge the first year of our life from the internet, then everything will go. They don't have any sort of special privileges. But as of now, everything stays alive.
Yeah.
I can't imagine with the ever-expanding storage that it won't.
I think one more question and then I'll talk about the
things that I know our community objects to is stuff that's obviously general syndicated content, like articles about gardening or whatever, that have nothing to do with our local community. I'm wondering if you do anything to, or encourage them to somehow tie it in to a local theme.
Yeah, I think one of our guidelines in the style guide is try to make it local, make it especially relevant. So, if it's winter in Arlington, if it's especially snowy winter in Arlington, if we had a gardening column, maybe they would talk about how to, deal with the snow. We definitely don't want our columnists just syndicating general content. But I think, in response to how do you work with, tell readers about it, I think to help the acceptance, you emphasize that it's local. You emphasize that the client is local, it's a local business. And I think there's higher acceptance for that than there would be if you just threw some general syndicated national thing on there.
Do you, in any of the content that you do you offer to actually create the content and also use that as a revenue stream?
So not on the sponsored column, but that's a good transition.
Good segue?
Good segue to another type of a second type of sponsored content that we do, which is a promoted post. So a promoted post is meant to be directly promotional for the business, but it's a one-time affair. It's not a repeat thing. And these often, promote one-time things: the opening of an apartment building, an event that's big, a community event that's coming up this weekend. And we will work with the advertiser, and we have a designated part-time employee on staff who writes these with the advertiser. And so she's trained to write it in a style that's kind of our style, a bit more newsy, but it's not, it's marked, all these are marked as sponsored content on the site. But I think, and Jay, maybe you have some thoughts on it, when the directly promotional content is more informational and newsy, it seems to get a better response than when it's salesy. And that we try to stay away from that.
Where do you post that? Does that go on Facebook and Twitter and on the site itself? Or what?
All of our content goes directly on the site. We have a blog style page. And so it gets posted with all our, in between all our other news content. And we try to keep a minimum 2 editorial pieces of content to 1 sponsored content.
Okay, but do you post it on Facebook and boost it for them?
Yes, we will post it on, our social media channels. And depending on the deal, there might be a boost or there might not be. The boost does help.
It's interesting. That's a really interesting perspective on it, because in our case, we do a lot of preview for, let's say, the arts community. So when there's a show at the local theater, but that's done as straight up editorial. Those are news items for this is happening. This is a thing that is happening. And I've always, I've always looked at that and I'm like, I'm really just doing PR for the theater, or I'm really just doing PR for the art center, or for whatever this local event is. But you kind of I'm sure, I don't know if anybody else here has ever rationalized that out in terms of saying, yeah, but it's, it's kind of a news event too. And I've never,
Depends on how good it is.
I've never
Some of them get
successfully,
covered, some of them don't.
I've just never successfully negotiated that with myself to figure out, like, where is that line? Because it's seemingly porous, gray, hard to see, and it moves around a lot. And I really have a heck of
Depends on how grumpy you are that day.
I guess it kind of does. It's like, go ahead.
One thing that we did with some of that was we also had very chronological arranged site, and so an advanced story only lasts so long in high visibility. We were finding organizations were wanting more of them. Can you do it again? Can you do another update? This, that. So we've kind of adapted a policy of saying we do one because it's newsworthy. If you want another, now we do it as sponsored content, or we'll pair the sponsored content as a perk of an ad with an ad. So, and then we've had pretty good success from organizations saying, well, yeah, we want the additional publicity, we're willing to pay for it.
I'd be interested to ask the group, Scott. When we were in Philly, I gave a talk similar to the one that I gave today, and a person from PBS Media Shift interviewed me subsequent to that about a comment that I made that was that we're trying to negotiate and figure out as a small team how we do PR writing or press release writing as a service for clients, right? So, and I alluded to that 4-foot fence rather than a giant concrete wall. I think the analogy I made was, you want to keep the dog in the yard, but you still like your neighbor, so you still want to talk to him, but you just want to keep the dog in the yard. And I would just wonder, has anybody else ever kind of tried to negotiate that line where you have a client that you have this incredible skill set, you're a good photographer, you're a trained writer, you could write this person's web copy for them far better and for a profit than they could do. You could write their presser for them better than they can do it and make money on it, but you're potentially compromising your journalistic ethics. And I'm not a journalist, okay? I'm not a trained journalist, but I'm empathetic to that battle, right? So I'm trying to figure out, I'd be interested to hear, especially from the journalists in the room, does that just make you want to vomit?
Yes.
So I mean, that's okay. Like,
I think it would be probably not appropriate for a 1 or 2 person shop.
Right.
But if you have somebody to put on that who is more on your revenue side, who would not be writing the news release and then taking the news release that they wrote and re-reporting it for a news story, I mean, that would just be
We have
absurd.
a freelancer that does just that for us. $25 a story puff piece, 300 words. We get the pictures.
And that cleans up does that
It's
clean
over
up
there.
the moral and ethical dilemma for everybody? Like if it's a freelancer that's okay.
Well, I think there's another issue. Once the story is written, are you running it? Are you effectively guaranteeing that you're going to run the story?
Well, we don't know yet because we've never really done very much of it.
Well, I mean, in a way, maybe it's a question of Kelly, but is part of the deal that story will run on your site? And of course, that could be okay if it ran as sponsored content. I mean, but if it runs as an editorial piece, then
We charge for it to run as sponsored content.
okay.
So
But if they didn't buy it as sponsored content, would you run it as an editorial freebie?
That would be up to the editor.
Okay.
I think the real ethical
I wouldn't step in between there. I would let my editor decide.
the real ethical conundrum would come in if somebody's trying to get you to write a press release about something that's somewhat controversial. Then you go report new development or whatever that you just wrote a press release
But that
about.
one's more obvious. I think the other side of it is having come from the public relations, corporate communications side, you really don't want those people as your clients because they're never really happy. You can never do enough for them, and it is really just so you're much better off putting your energy into what you do best, which is the news business, and then they will eventually see the wisdom. We have a lot of nonprofits that we work with, and we do a lot for free, and then finally just say, okay, don't you feel really bad that you've just taken advantage of us for so long? And we're just finally turning that into contracts, but they're still not happy. It's like you still cannot do enough for the Good Samaritan Ladies Auxiliary Hospital.
We have a few of those in our community, and I think that what I've learned in the time since Philly, and as I've worked through this with our editorial team, particularly our editorial leadership, is that I've walked that back a long way, because I think that, and I think we're both on the business side of this thing, and I think that we kind of we're focused on, I want to provide jobs for people. I want this thing to work, right? And sometimes we're not as, I'm going to speak for me, I'm not as plugged in. Like, I don't always get it. I'm on tape delay sometimes with the things that need to slow me down to say, well, wait a minute, this short-term win is a long-term loss, right? And I think that, I'm just going to say this, that it's the team that we have that sort of helps guide that when we get into those alternative revenue places. Those places where we go non-traditional. I'm learning that I got to get everybody, I got to hear the things that are wrong with the idea. So that the idea can be right, like really right to its core, like you figured out everybody's on board. And I don't know if you guys have worked with people on the business side that are challenging like that, but try to find if that's that guy or you're that guy. If you're that challenging guy, listen better, and if you're the guy that's being challenged, then speak up, because you've got to have that conversation so the fence stays low.
Well,
so that you can pass the ball over the fence.
yeah, that always, when we were with Patch, that was something that was really irritating. But I got it, but there were some ways that it was done, it didn't make sense for our market, and I think there was a lack of understanding of our market. And so, like, one of them was Susan G. Komen, and we were supposed to find somebody who had breast cancer, and it was supposed to be this conversation around that. And it's like, okay, so can't you partner with the local hospital to do that piece of it? That would make more sense than me contriving this journalistic thing that really isn't like something that is on my list of things to tackle right now. It's not like a newsy conversation. It's more something that in my humble opinion, when we were talking about the fact that we have 1.5 people working on our website, is that really going to get me traffic so that I can be of value to the people that are paying their bills right now? But then on the other hand, if you're not trying to be something a little bit more to diversify that, I get that piece of it, but it has to really make sense with the conversations that you're having with the people you're serving.
See, so what we learned from sponsored content was, at least our position on it was, keep it super simple. Our thing, create clear lines, like you said, and then go work on other stuff. Because like that was controversial within our small team, right? So the journalists are pissed at me. We can't do that. That's not going to work. So I kind of learned from that. I'm like going, okay, well, wait a minute. I've got 12 other ideas. Let's just let this 11th one kind of like we're not working. This one doesn't have a team on it. So then what we did was we just quit trying to win. Like we just agreed, okay, nobody's going to win this battle. We're just going to kind of call a truce on this one, and let's go work together on stuff that we can all be jacked up about that drive revenue in the business. And it was just sort of a lesson for me that not everybody's going to always be on board with every idea
So I think that,
We don't wanna miss the other stuff.
Yeah, go ahead.
sure, so let me just say briefly that, I think at its best, sponsored content actually serves to relieve some of that pressure from the editorial side to, potentially, promote somebody. Because then you have an ability to say to your client who wants something, some attention for something, well, we have this product. So for instance, we often get we get press releases, and people are like, I want this press release promoted, and it's not something that we would normally cover as news. So what did we do? We built a section of the site that's just press releases, and you can pay to publish your press release there, and it goes on the ticker and on top, but it's not news content. And we also have people, coming to us, how do I promote the event? Well, this event I'm doing. Well, we built a event calendar where you can buy a featured event, and it gets listed on a weekly event post. So in that way,
How much do you get for that?
we're only charging like $25 to $40, depending on whether they're for profit or non-profit. It's not that much, and it's completely affordable. But then we could say to that person,
You have an alternate
you
place
you
to.
have a way to get this done,
Yeah.
and it's going to turn out good for you, and turn out good for us.
Yeah.
But to get back to the fabled 5 types of sponsored content. So number 3 is something we're calling a promoted profile. This is something we're bundling with something we call business membership, which is $99 a month. It's sort of similar if you've seen those lifestyle like local lifestyle, regional lifestyle magazines, and they have like a list of they have like a special advertising section with 10 profiles of dentists. It's sort of like that, where we are designated sponsored content person will go to a business, interview the owner, take photos of them and the business and their team, do a photo gallery of that, and then do an 500 to 600 word article telling the story of the business and what makes them unique. And most businesses do have local businesses do have interesting stories to tell, and nobody's really telling that well for them. It's not being told on their website oftentimes. So this is a way for it to, and this content has actually been fairly popular. People will actually like it. We've just started doing it, but it's been pretty cool.
How much are you charging for that?
So that's that $99 a month, and you get a profile published once per year. So instead of doing a one-time $1,000, which is what the local magazine would charge, we're trying to make it into a monthly thing that makes it more affordable, more palatable, and makes it
So you're charging the user or the person you're writing about?
the business.
The business.
The business is paying $1,200 a year in
We're bundling a couple other
a
things
couple of
in.
things with that, okay.
So they
Oh,
get,
yes.
they get in some kind of directory preferred.
Yes, they're in
Okay.
that's the other major component is they're in a business directory
Okay.
that links to their profile along with their website and directions and that sort of thing.
What happens if the dentist ends up, getting arrested for being a pedophile or whatever? When
Or kills
that
a lion.
connection is not a good connection. Has
Yeah,
it happened yet?
that has yet to happen, and but the most likely course of action is that we will end their say, I'm sorry, we're ending your membership agreement.
Give it like a morals clause?
Yeah, so we have a sort of a small agreement associated with this, and it's terminable. Either party can terminate it within 30 days for any reason.
But if do you go ahead and do the business profile right up front, or you schedule it out? Because there's a way, because I can see them doing the business profile
Sure.
and then canceling it, and then
Yeah.
have gotten all that value
Sure.
for $99.
Yeah. So
How do you prevent that?
well, it usually takes about a month for our after they join for our person to get in touch with them, and then they'll set up the meeting for some time, a month down the line, and then they'll write it, and it will be published a month down the line. So we at least get them for a couple of months, and then in order for it to stay on the site, they need to be an active member.
You would take it down.
So the profile would disappear if they cancel.
Right.
And they would delete it from the directory.
Right.
So it's $99 a year?
per month.
And how many runs do you do one every day? Or-
So theoretically, we could do one per day. Not yet, we just started selling them.
Operationally.
Yeah.
What is your price range for the different types of, or are you done with the 5 yet?
So that was 3.
Okay.
Wait a minute, one more thing on this.
Yes.
So if I pay the 99 and you come out and do the profile on me and my business, will you do a profile on my competitor the following, the next day? Or do I have some kind of protection?
It's not explicit yet, but the idea is we would only take a certain number of businesses per category, and it would be interspersed. Unlike your magazine where it's 10 dentists,
Right.
and cookie cutter profiles, yours is going to be published on a Tuesday, and your competitors might be published the next month,
Right.
Or something like that.
I like the idea of tying it with the business directory. We don't have a business directory right now, but we'll do a business spotlight, is what we call it, for $300, and it runs for a week. But then it stays live for up to 6 months in our business directory section. And then we take it down, and they got to pay to get it back up.
Yeah.
How much to get back up?
300.
Even though you don't have to rewrite it, you just put it back up.
300.
Okay. So in other words, you're charging the same he is.
No, he gets $1,200 a year.
She's getting $300 4 times a year. My guy says that's.
But she has to go back and resell it 4 times.
Right. So that's why I like the membership. I think that's a better model, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, so this is unproven so far. Again, we just launched it, but the idea is that this $99 a month is credit. We require that it's credit card recurring billing. Now they could cancel at any time, but the idea being that when you have to go ask for the renewal, it's harder than if it's just a 2-digit figure appearing on the credit card.
And where does it run? Where does the profile run? Is it in your normal editorial?
Yep.
It's not off in the business segment? Or
Normal editorial. But again, we're trying to maintain at least 2 editorial articles per sponsored content, piece of sponsored content that's published, so that we're not overwhelming readers. I think that is a danger with sponsored content. Is if you're publishing too much sponsored content, you're going to devalue it for not only for clients, but you're going to devalue your entire site for readers. So you have to walk balance. So briefly, I'm sure we're running short on time, and I'm sure Jay has more thoughts. So
No, you're doing good.
Theoretically, we have
Number
2
4.
minutes.
You have 4 and 5.
Okay.
We got a few more minutes.
4 and 5. Number 4 is a sponsored feature that's written by us, but it's sponsored by somebody. And so this is a regular thing. We do a pet of the week that's sponsored by a dog walker. We have a Startup Monday. It's a weekly feature that profiles a startup company in Arlington, and it's sponsored by a real estate office building owner. And these are cool because they're actual editorial content that people like, and it's written by us, and it's just we slap the sponsor's logo on it.
What do you call it?
We call it a sponsored feature.
No, well, startups and things.
So we did a Startup Monday for startup companies,
Okay.
profiling startup companies, and a pet of the week. And the
So
price.
that's stuff that it would be almost worthwhile actually reporting in the first place, but you're branding it up and
Yeah.
doing it on a regular
There's a
basis.
natural sponsor for those kind of
Yeah.
things.
You charge the same for the pet of the week as you do for the startup?
Nope. we come up with a pricing that makes sense for each client. And
Is that labeled as being sponsored content, or do they just get a sponsored credit within the
it's labeled as, we label it very prominently as sponsored content with the sponsor logo. And then lastly, since we're running low on time, we have a sponsored list, and the manifestation of this is it is some sort of a regular, some sort of a list that links back to a sponsor's website. And so the way we do this is we have a couple of these for real estate agents. And so we have just listed like real estate properties that were just listed on the market in Arlington. And then the list links back to the property page, but it's on the sponsor, on a real estate agent's website. So we're driving 3,000 to 4,000 clicks per week to client websites through this.
Say that again.
Explain it over
Sorry, I tried to rush through it, but so.
So it's just real estate. right?
So we're doing this for real estate, and so the agent actually writes it. The real estate company actually writes this. They do a little blurb. They're like X number of properties hit the market this week in Arlington, and they do a representative list of 8 properties, and each one of these will link back to the information on the property on the agent's website.
The
So
agent
now-
has a search feature on their website,
So-
and so they get the link from that house. And put it-
Right. And then if you want to see all active listings, you can also go to the sponsor's website.
So do you just do that for one agent? Do you have only one agent that's doing it?
We have just listed, we have properties that were just reduced, we have properties that were just sold, we have open houses,
That's what we do.
and,
But we don't want it.
and each of those, not open houses right now, but each of those theoretically has its own real estate agent sponsor. Now they're exclusive to that particular, just listed,
Yeah.
but that's exclusive for them. They get all that traffic. We instantly become their number one source of website traffic.
And how long does that feature last, and how much do they pay?
So it's weekly. It's however they want, however long they want it, and we're charging $200 per week.
So you only have one realtor who's doing that?
We have 3 different realtors who are doing it.
And so you have 3
What?
listings, or you have one for just listed, one for just sold, or?
Yeah, one for each.
So
One
what is your-
so like one goes on a I'm sorry. So each of these different features are published on a different day. In terms of the number of like actual real estate listings within the feature, it's pretty much whatever the real estate agent wants to put up. If they want to do
One real
8,
estate agent has the spot on a particular day, and they can list 5 different properties.
right, and it doesn't have, and they don't do just their own properties. They just randomly pick,
So it's like a column almost,
Yeah,
but it's a list.
but
But there's
But
a
it's
blurb,
more
there's an
easy
editorial
than
blurb.
there's a little blurb,
Uh-huh.
and then there's a bulleted list. It's very simple.
The blurb is good, though. I mean, they provide good information in
Yeah.
there.
It's very simple for the real estate agent to write. It's simple for us to publish, and it drives
And
traffic.
I think it's really important to scroll back down or up. They've got that banner at the top too, which clicks through to their website. But what I liked about it, which I would not have thought to do, is you put just listed on your navigation bar. So I'm sure that drives more traffic.
Yeah, so we actually list all our different columns and sponsored lists up here at the top of every page.
Could you would you mind giving me a link to your site so I could look at that on my own?
Sure,
I mean, what's
sure. It's arlnow.com.
Scott, in terms of the pricing that you're setting on these, how does it compare with what you charge for regular ads? And you've got a lot of traffic compared to many of the rest of us, and how do you figure that?
So our typical display ad is, excuse me, $500 a month, and if you price out $200 a week for one of these, that's about $866. So the price is higher, but we're steering a lot more traffic through this, and I think our display ads perform well, and we have happy clients in them. I think our sponsored content is, if the display ad is a double, the sponsored content often is a home run.
So if you're, say the real estate ad, the real estate story gets, how many clicks would you say typically?
3,000 to 4,000
3 or 4,000
or per week.
But you're doing like 1.5 million page views a month or something?
We're doing just over 1 million page views per month on our Arlington site. But even if you're steering, 300 to 400 per week, that's still going to be a lot for that advertiser to see.
It's very clear.
Yeah, and if you go through the pricing, the per click pricing is lower than they're going to pay Google by any.
drive
Sure.
that many.
Yeah.
Well, and it's embedded in editorial content, which honestly has a lot more value than being.
Right.
And it's useful for readers. Readers, at least in our coverage area, real estate is sort of a sport that people follow because they want to know, where their house is going up and down and what their neighbor's doing. And so, this is useful content for people.
Yeah, and they've already pre-selected that they're interested in a just listed house, so in theory, they're a better fit than anything. But
Right, just to be clear, I mean, she's a realtor, she's doing it with you, and I want to be just listed as well. How does that work?
We have a wait list.
Okay, so in other words, she's got just listed until she decides she doesn't want anymore.
Right.
So what's available for me would be just sold or just reduced.
Right.
Open house?
Open
So,
house.
open houses. So basically we have five real estate types of content per week. We haven't quite made it Monday through Friday. We have 2 then.
Scott's pretty smart. What do you bet that there's 5 really dominant real estate agents?
And I want to tell you guys, Scott and I had a great conversation about this. I decided to do it. I'm already doing property transfers, just listed, just sold was a lot better name than what I could come up with. But I emailed this customer and said, how's it going? Because I need a testimonial. I'm going to sell this too. Can you tell me how it's working for you? Didn't lead him down the path at all. And he wrote a glowing recommendation. Very happy and plans on continuing. So I need to get that to you. Maybe we could even share that with you guys. If you decide to do something like that, you'd have a testimonial.
The other thing to do with this is track your outbound clicks. Now there are a couple of ways to do that, but if you're relying on the advertiser to track their how many clicks are going to them, it's giving them more power. We actually sold this before we got the idea to track the outbound clicks, and had no idea how it was working. Then we ran. The just listed was up for renewal. We started using a tool called ClickMeter. It's called ClickMeter. I think there might be other tools. This is the one we use, but they allow you to do sort of like Bitly. You can do custom shortened links, and you can put them on your domain. So ours is just t.airallnow.com, and we tracked that we tracked the links on the first one, and we're like, holy smokes, there are 3,000 clicks on this thing. We had no idea it was that popular. And we went to the client and we said, we just tried this. You're getting 3,000 clicks a week. This is great. This is great. And they're like, yeah, we would like to renew that.
Before you raise the price, can we lock that in, please?
Yeah.
We really need to wrap up, but not to end on a sour note, but let's hear a couple of things, or one thing from each of you guys where you tried in this that just really didn't work.
Don't try this at home.
I'm not going to say
Exactly, don't try this at home.
I won't say that Made Before One Time didn't work or isn't working, but I will say, again, temper your enthusiasm for buying an island off of your t-shirt sales. Not every alternative revenue strategy is going to lead to untold riches. And
You got solid revenues on it.
yeah, I mean,
Profits.
we're we pulled in probably close to $10,000 worth of apparel and pint glasses and sold, but I think that part of this is about, as small media organizations, you also have to think about impact, significance, perception. How does it meet your brand's mission? What are you all about, right? And so, this brand, this little thing that we do, totally locks in on what our brand is all about. And so it creates all kinds of opportunities for us to extend our brand. It's paying for itself barely, right? We're okay, but it's not necessarily a profit center. But I think for what I would say is try stuff, but be merciless in how you evaluate it. Just detach. Even get a friend to look at or a trusted business associate. Have your accountant look at it. Whomever that person is that is the numbers guy. Girl, have that woman or man look at it and say, okay, I know you love this thing, but this is stupid. And if they say that, just listen to them. you know, like you would listen to your ad rep or your editor or whatever, it's okay to be merciless about evaluating it. And if it's a stinker, just dump it. Quit screwing around with it because you don't have enough time. You know, and so I would say, like, you know, I'm not saying that we still like Made in the 419, but we understand now what it is. Like, we get it now, you know, and we understand, like, its place in our ecosystem. And so we're gonna adjust and move forward with it as such. You know, that's what one thing I would say is, like, not everything's gonna be a home run. Some things you're gonna swing and miss.
I think for us, the swing and miss has been the profiles that I talked about in the business membership. Now, we just launched it, but we did a fair amount of promotion on the site via email, and we have 5 paid clients. Now, I'm not going to, you know, cough at $500 a month in revenue. Every little bit helps, but we had higher expectations for. I had higher expectations for it. And I think the lesson learned is things we're doing here are new, not only to us but to the client. And so it's as wonderful and as great of a price point as I thought that was for what we're offering. I think it requires more client education, and we're not going to be able to sell it at scale. It's going to be, if we're going to sell it, it's mostly going to be our ad rep going out and talking to the client and telling them what it is and how it works, and making sure that for those who sign up for it, that they're getting the most out of it.
Do you think it's priced too high?
I'm just going to ask that. You think miss the price
I
point?
really don't. There are some other parts of it where we can show this is like a $500 a month value, because there's like an ad widget on the site and some other things. But maybe it's priced too high. It very well could be.
Or maybe for introductory, maybe it's priced too high. Maybe it's kind of like, hey, get it now.
Compared to everything else that we sell, it's the least expensive thing.
Well, you know, the other thing that you could think about too is that, you know, Eleanor made this. She's in the room, so I'm going to pick on her. But she made this point that when we were talking about sales, is it's not about you, it's about them. And I think you can apply that same exact logic to product development. You have to be able to say, this is, like, if I were a consumer, I would be jacked up about this. This is a great value. If it's about you and making more money and filling more space and leveraging this or leveraging that, you might be off on the wrong track, or you should at least validate that somebody thinks it's cool. And sometimes that's just as simple as asking your kid, does this make any sense? Like, because you've never heard me talk about this. I've been deep in bed with this thing for 3 weeks, so I just love it because I'm almost forced to at this point because it's my idea. Like, put it in front of somebody that's never seen it before and, like, give it the BS test, you know, and ask them to, because that same logic about it's not about you, it's about them, that should be applied to your product development too. Does this matter to them?
You guys can be mad at me because I have to call a halt to this. Until I tell you that we have about 10 cases of beer left.
Sweet.
You've really softened the landing on that one.
Yes.
So once again, you get to say, it's happy hour.
But it's not on ice.
It's Guinness. It's Guinness.
So instead of doing the final debriefing session in the theater as is on schedule, we're gonna do it back in the lobby, have a couple of drinks, finish off the food, and sort of generally chat about what we've learned, what we want to go home and accomplish based on the so wrapped up.
Cool. Hey, thanks. It's great. I learned a lot. Get back to you all.